Dr. Elena Rodriguez never believed in aliens until she found herself staring at three small creatures that defied every law of biology she knew. The creatures looked like tiny dragons, each no bigger than a house cat, with scales that shimmered between deep purple and silver, depending on how the light hit them. Their eyes were large and intelligent, glowing with an inner light that seemed to pulse with their heartbeat. It all started when Elena received an emergency call from her colleague, Dr. Marcus Webb, at 3 in the morning. Marcus worked for a government research facility that most people didn't know existed. His voice was shaking when he called her. "Elena, I need you to come to the lab right now. Bring your veterinary equipment. All of it." Elena had known Marcus since college. They had studied together, shared late-night study sessions, and even dated briefly before realizing they were better as friends. She had never heard him sound so scared. "Marcus, what's wrong? It's 3 in the morning. Just come. Please. I can't explain over the phone, but I need someone I trust. Someone who knows about animal behavior." Elena lived only 20 minutes from the facility, but the drive felt like hours. Her mind raced with possibilities. What kind of animals could make Marcus sound so terrified? She had dealt with everything from angry bears to venomous snakes in her career as a wildlife veterinarian. The research facility looked different at night. The usual bustle of scientists and researchers was gone, leaving only empty hallways lit by harsh fluorescent lights. Marcus met her at the main entrance, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly. "Before we go in," he said, "you need to understand that what you're about to see is classified. You can't tell anyone about this. Ever." Elena nodded, though her curiosity was eating at her. Marcus led her through several corridors she had never seen before, deeper into the building than she had ever been. They passed through multiple security checkpoints, each one more advanced than the last. Finally, they stopped at a heavy metal door marked with symbols Elena didn't recognize. Marcus placed his hand on a scanner, and the door opened with a soft hiss. The room beyond was unlike anything Elena had ever seen. It was large and circular, with high ceilings and walls covered in strange equipment. But what caught her attention immediately were the three small creatures huddled together in the center of the room. They were inside a large glass enclosure that looked more like a terrarium than a cage. The floor was covered with what looked like sand, but it sparkled with an otherworldly light. Small plants with silver leaves grew throughout the space, and a gentle mist fell from hidden sprinklers in the ceiling. "What are they?" Elena whispered. "We found them 3 days ago," Marcus said. "Their ship crashed in the desert outside Las Vegas. These three were the only survivors." Elena stared at the creatures. They were unlike anything she had ever seen in nature. Their bodies were lean and graceful, covered in scales that seemed to shift color with their emotions. They had 4 legs and wings that were currently folded against their backs. Their tails were long and ended in what looked like a small sail or fin. "Have you tried to communicate with them?" Marcus shook his head. "Every time a human gets too close, they panic. They won't eat the food we've given them. They won't drink the water. We've tried everything. They're going to die if we can't help them." Elena watched the creatures more carefully. They were pressed together in the far corner of the enclosure, as far from the glass as they could get. Their eyes darted nervously toward any movement outside their space. She could see the fear in their body language. "They're babies," she said suddenly. "What? Look at them. Really look at them. They're not fully grown. See how their wings don't quite fit their bodies yet, and their scales are still soft. These are hatchlings." Marcus stared at the creatures with new eyes. If they're babies, where are their parents? Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Probably died in the crash. For the next hour, Elena observed the creatures while Marcus explained what had happened. A military patrol had found the wreckage of what could only be described as a spacecraft in the Nevada desert. Most of the ship had been destroyed in the crash, but they had found these 3 creatures in what appeared to be a nursery or sleeping area. "They've been tested for diseases," Marcus said. "They're clean. No pathogens that could harm humans or Earth life. But we can't get them to respond to us at all." Elena noticed something interesting. When Marcus spoke, the creatures pressed themselves even further into the corner. But when she spoke, they seemed slightly less afraid. Their eyes still watched her warily, but they didn't try to hide. "I think they can sense our emotions," she said. "Fear makes them more afraid. Aggression makes them panic." The military team that found them was pretty aggressive, Marcus admitted. They thought the creatures might be dangerous. Elena spent the rest of the night observing the creatures and taking notes. She noticed they had distinct personalities. One was clearly the leader, always positioning itself between its companions and any perceived threat. This one was slightly larger than the others and had more silver in its scales. The second creature was the most curious. Despite its fear, it kept sneaking glances at Elena when it thought she wasn't looking. Its scales had more purple than the others, and it moved with quick, bird-like motions. The third was the smallest and seemed to be sick. It barely moved, and its scales were dull. Elena could see it was breathing rapidly, a sign of stress or illness in most animals. As the sun began to rise, Elena made a decision that would change everything. "I want to go in there," she said. Marcus looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Elena, we don't know if they're dangerous. They could have claws or poison or dash. Marcus, look at them. They're terrified babies who just lost their parents in a crash. They're not dangerous. They're dying of fear." It took Elena an hour to convince Marcus to let her try. Finally, he agreed, but only with full protective gear and emergency protocols in place. Elena put on a lightweight hazmat suit and entered the airlock that led to the creature's enclosure. Her heart was pounding, but she tried to project calm. As the inner door opened, all three creatures immediately pressed themselves into the corner. Elena sat down just inside the door, as far from them as possible. She didn't look directly at them, instead focusing on her hands in her lap. She began to speak in a soft, soothing voice, the same tone she used with frightened animals. "It's okay," she said. "I'm not going to hurt you. I know you're scared. I know you miss your family." For 20 minutes, nothing happened. Then, Elena heard a soft sound, almost like a purr or a hum. When she looked up carefully, she saw that the curious one had moved slightly closer. Its large eyes were fixed on her face. "That's right," she said softly. "I'm a friend." The sound grew louder, and Elena realized it was coming from all three creatures. It was beautiful, like a combination of whale song and bird call. She felt tears welling up in her eyes as she understood what it was. They were crying. These alien babies were crying for their lost parents. Elena slowly reached into her bag and pulled out a protein bar. She unwrapped it carefully and broke off a small piece, placing it on the ground between herself and the creatures. Then, she took a bite of the remaining bar. The leader immediately became alert, its nostrils flaring. Elena could see it was analyzing the smell, trying to determine if the food was safe. After several minutes, it made a decision and moved forward cautiously. Elena held her breath as the creature approached the piece of protein bar. It sniffed it carefully, then looked up at Elena. For a moment, their eyes met, and Elena felt a strange connection, as if the creature was looking into her soul. Then it ate the food. Within minutes, all three creatures had moved closer. They were still wary, but the wall of fear was beginning to crack. Elena spent the next hour slowly building their trust, offering small pieces of food and speaking in soft tones. When she finally left the enclosure, Marcus was amazed at the change in the creature's behavior. "They're still afraid of me," he said, "but they're not panic-stricken anymore." Elena nodded. "They trust me a little bit now. But, Marcus, we need to think about the long term. These aren't laboratory animals. They're intelligent beings. They need more than just food and water." "What do you mean?" "They need comfort. They need security. They need someone who cares about them." Elena paused, knowing how crazy her next words would sound. "I think they need me to take care of them." Marcus stared at her. "Elena, they're aliens. We can't just adopt them like stray cats." "Why not? Their parents are dead. Their world might be gone for all we know. Right now, they're three orphan babies in a strange place with strange beings. They need a mother figure. Elena looked back at the enclosure, where the three creatures were watching her through the glass. The smallest one, the one that had seemed sick, was looking much more alert now. Its scales had regained some of their shine. I'm going to come back tomorrow, she decided. And the day after that. And every day until they're strong enough to survive on their own. Marcus shook his head, but Elena could see he was considering her words. The higher-ups aren't going to like this. They want to study them. They can study them all they want. But not at the expense of these babies' lives. And Marcus? I think these creatures are more intelligent than we realize. If we treat them with respect and kindness now, they might be willing to share their knowledge with us later. As Elena drove home that morning, her mind was racing with plans. She would need special food, a better environment for them, and, most importantly, she would need to gain their complete trust. She didn't know it yet, but the three alien dragon hatchlings had already chosen her as their new guardian. They had sensed something in her that they had never felt from any other human. Genuine love and compassion with no hidden agenda. The bond that would form between them would be unlike anything science had ever documented. But that journey was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since Elena first entered the enclosure with the alien hatchlings. What had started as a simple rescue mission had evolved into something extraordinary. The three creatures, who Elena had named Aurora, Nova, and Cosmos, had begun to show remarkable changes in behavior and health. Aurora, the leader with silver-tinted scales, had grown noticeably larger and more confident. She would approach Elena directly now, even allowing gentle touches along her neck and back. Her scales felt warm and slightly electric, like touching a living battery. Nova, the curious purple-scaled one, had become Elena's shadow. Whenever Elena entered the enclosure, Nova would follow her around, chattering in a musical language that Elena was slowly beginning to understand. Nova was clearly the most intelligent of the three, often solving simple puzzles Elena created using colored blocks and shapes. Cosmos, the smallest one who had appeared sick, was thriving under Elena's care. His scales had developed a beautiful blue-green iridescence, and he had grown playful and affectionate. He was also displaying some unusual abilities that made the research team very excited. Dr. Webb watched through the observation window as Elena worked with the creatures. She was teaching them basic hand signals and had created a simple communication system using color cards. The military observers who came by weekly were impressed, but growing impatient. They want to move them to a more secure facility, Marcus told Elena during one of their briefings. General Morrison thinks they're too valuable to keep in a basic research lab. Elena felt a surge of protective anger. These aren't weapons, Marcus. They're children. I know that. You know that. But the military sees potential applications for their abilities. Elena had witnessed those abilities firsthand. Aurora could generate small electrical discharges from her claws, enough to power simple devices. Nova had demonstrated an incredible memory, perfectly recalling complex patterns after seeing them only once. And Cosmos had shown the most remarkable ability of all. It happened during Elena's 4th week with the hatchlings. She had been feeling particularly tired and stressed from the long hours she was spending at the facility. As she sat in the enclosure, Cosmos had approached her and gently touched his snout to her forehead. Instantly, Elena felt a wave of peace wash over her. Her headache disappeared, her tension melted away, and she felt refreshed as if she had just woken from a perfect night's sleep. When she looked at Cosmos, his eyes were glowing with a soft golden light. He's empathic, she had told Marcus afterward. He can sense emotions and somehow manipulate them, but not in a harmful way. He was trying to help me feel better. The discovery had created a stir among the research team, but Elena was more concerned about the emotional well-being of her 3 charges. They were becoming more attached to her each day, and she was growing equally attached to them. The problem was that Elena couldn't be with them 24 hours a day. She had to leave them alone at night, and during those hours, they would become withdrawn and fearful again. The security cameras showed them huddled together, making soft distress sounds until Elena returned. "They're bonding with you like baby animals bond with their mothers," Marcus observed. "But you're human. You need sleep, food, a life outside of this facility." Elena had been thinking about the same problem. The hatchlings were clearly traumatized by their separation from their parents and their strange new environment. They needed constant companionship and comfort to heal emotionally. That's when Elena made a decision that would change everything. "I want to take them home with me," she announced to Marcus one Friday afternoon. Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. "Elena, that's impossible. They're classified. They're aliens. They belong to the government now. They don't belong to anyone," Elena said firmly. "They're living beings who need care and love. And they're not getting what they need here. The military will never allow it." "Then we don't tell the military." Elena had been developing her plan for days. The facility had a back entrance that was rarely used. The security system had blind spots that she had identified, and she knew Marcus's access codes. "You're talking about kidnapping alien life forms from a government facility," Marcus said. "That's treason, Elena. They could lock you up for the rest of your life." "Look at them, Marcus." Elena pointed to the enclosure where the three hatchlings were playing with some toys she had brought them. "They're happy when I'm here and miserable when I'm gone. They need a real home, not a laboratory." Marcus watched the creatures for several minutes. Aurora was teaching Cosmos how to stack blocks, while Nova was investigating a new puzzle Elena had introduced. They looked like any other young animals at play, except for their otherworldly beauty and obvious intelligence. "Even if I wanted to help you," Marcus said slowly, "how would you hide them? They're not exactly inconspicuous." Elena had thought about this too. "My house is isolated. 10 acres of land, thick woods all around. The nearest neighbor is half a mile away. I could set up a proper habitat for them in my basement. Climate-controlled, secure, comfortable. And what about food? Medical care? What if they get sick?" I've been researching their nutritional needs. They're omnivores, but they seem to prefer proteins and certain minerals. I can provide that. As for medical care, I'm a veterinarian. I'm probably more qualified than anyone else to take care of them." Marcus was quiet for a long time, watching the hatchlings play. Finally, he spoke. "The military inspection is scheduled for Monday. General Morrison wants to transfer them to a maximum security facility in Colorado. If you're going to do this crazy thing, it has to be this weekend." Elena felt her heart racing. "Are you saying you'll help me?" "I'm saying I'll look the other way for exactly 1 hour on Sunday night. After that, I don't know anything about where they went." Sunday night came faster than Elena had expected. She had spent the weekend preparing her basement, installing proper lighting, heating, and ventilation systems. She had created separate sleeping areas for each hatchling and a large play area where they could exercise their wings. Marcus met her at the facility's back entrance at 11 p.m. The skeleton crew of security guards was focused on the main building, leaving the research wing relatively unmonitored. "You have 1 hour," Marcus whispered as he disabled the alarm system. "After that, I'm calling in a security breach." Elena's heart was pounding as she made her way to the hatchling's enclosure. When she entered, all three creatures immediately came to her, sensing her excitement and nervousness. "We're going on a trip," she told them softly, "to a new home where we can be together all the time." Elena had brought a large pet carrier, the biggest she could find. She had lined it with soft blankets and had drilled air holes throughout. The hatchlings seemed to understand that something important was happening. They allowed her to guide them into the carrier without resistance. Cosmos pressed his snout against Elena's hand as she was about to close the carrier. That familiar wave of calm washed over her, and she realized he was trying to comfort her in return for all the comfort she had given them. "Thank you," she whispered. The trip to Elena's house took 30 minutes through back roads and quiet neighborhoods. Elena kept talking to the hatchlings during the drive, letting them know what was happening and where they were going. When they arrived at her house, Elena carried the container down to the basement she had prepared. As she opened it, 3 curious heads poked out to examine their new surroundings. The basement had been transformed into an alien paradise. Elena had recreated the environment from their original enclosure as closely as possible, but with much more space. There were climbing structures, hiding places, a small pool of water, and comfortable sleeping areas. Aurora was the first to emerge, followed by Nova and then Cosmos. They explored cautiously at first, then, with growing excitement, as they realized this space was entirely theirs. For the first time since Elena had known them, the hatchlings began to truly play. Aurora spread her wings to their full span, something she had never been able to do in a laboratory. Nova discovered she could climb to the ceiling using her claws and glide down. Cosmos found a sunny spot near one of the heat lamps and curled up contentedly. That night, Elena brought down a sleeping bag and pillows. She wanted to stay close to the hatchlings on their first night in their new home. As she settled down to sleep, she felt a warm presence beside her. All three hatchlings had arranged themselves around her sleeping area. Aurora positioned herself like a guard, watching the stairs. Nova curled up near Elena's feet, and Cosmos nestled against her side like a cat. For the first time since the crash that had orphaned them, the alien hatchlings felt safe enough to truly rest. And for the first time since she had met them, Elena felt like she was truly their guardian, not just their caretaker. As she drifted off to sleep, Elena could hear the soft, musical humming that the hatchlings made when they were content. It was the most beautiful lullaby she had ever heard. But even in her happiness, Elena knew that their troubles were just beginning. By morning, the military would discover the hatchlings were missing. They would launch a massive search, and eventually they would come looking for her. Elena pushed those thoughts away and focused on the warm, peaceful presence of the three alien babies she had grown to love. Whatever happened next, she would protect them. They had chosen her as their new family, and she would not let them down. 6 months had passed since Elena brought Aurora, Nova, and Cosmos home. What she had expected to be a temporary rescue had become something far deeper and more complex than she had ever imagined. The hatchlings had grown significantly during their time with Elena. Aurora was now the size of a medium dog, with wings that could lift her several feet off the ground. Her silver scales had deepened to a rich platinum color, and she had developed small horns along her skull that gave her a regal appearance. Nova had grown the most intellectually. She could now understand complex human speech and had learned to communicate using a combination of gestures, sounds, and colored symbols Elena had created. Her purple scales had developed intricate patterns that seemed to shift based on her emotions and thoughts. Cosmos remained the smallest of the three, but his empathic abilities had grown stronger. He could now sense Elena's emotions from across the house, and would appear whenever she was feeling stressed or sad. His scales had settled into a beautiful blue-green pattern that reminded Elena of ocean waves. The first month after their escape from the facility had been terrifying. Elena had watched the news constantly, expecting reports of a massive government search for missing alien specimens. Instead, she found stories about a training exercise at the research facility and the safe relocation of some exotic animals to another location. Marcus had covered for her perfectly. The official story was that the 3 specimens had been transferred to a classified facility for advanced study. Only a handful of people knew the truth, and they were all bound by security oaths. But Elena's relief was short-lived. As the hatchlings grew and developed, they began displaying abilities that made Elena realize she was in over her head. Aurora had learned to generate and control electricity with frightening precision. She could power Elena's entire house with the energy she produced, and she had once short-circuited the neighborhood's power grid by accident during a thunderstorm when she got excited. Nova's intelligence was advancing at an exponential rate. She had taught herself to read by watching Elena work on her computer, and she was now capable of complex problem-solving that rivaled human engineers. She had even figured out how to access the internet, and had been researching her own species. Cosmos's empathic abilities had evolved beyond simple emotion sensing. He could now project thoughts and images directly into Elena's mind, creating a form of telepathic communication that left Elena both amazed and sometimes overwhelmed. The real challenge came when the hatchlings began to mature emotionally and started asking questions Elena couldn't answer. One evening, as Elena was preparing dinner, Nova approached her carrying a tablet she had somehow learned to operate. On the screen was an article about space exploration and the search for extraterrestrial life. Nova made a series of complex sounds and gestures pointing at the article and then at herself and her siblings. Elena understood immediately. Nova was asking about her own species, her homeworld, and whether there were others like her somewhere in the universe. "I don't know," Elena admitted, sitting down so she could look Nova in the eyes. "I wish I did, but I don't know where you came from or if there are others like you." The sadness in Nova's large, intelligent eyes nearly broke Elena's heart. For the first time, Elena truly understood the magnitude of what these three beings had lost. They weren't just orphaned. They might be the last of their kind in the entire universe. That night, the three hatchlings didn't sleep in their usual spots around Elena's bed. Instead, they huddled together in the corner of the basement, making soft, mournful sounds that Elena recognized as grieving. Elena realized that no matter how much love and care she provided, she could never give them the one thing they needed most, their own kind. It was Cosmos who provided the solution, though it came in a way Elena never expected. 2 weeks after Nova's heartbreaking question, Elena woke up in the middle of the night with a strange sensation in her mind. She felt as if she was dreaming while awake, experiencing images and emotions that weren't her own. She saw vast cities made of crystal and light, floating among the clouds of a distant world. She saw beings like Aurora, Nova, and Cosmos, but fully grown, with wings that could carry them across continents and abilities that bordered on magic. Most importantly, she saw a great ship, larger than any human spacecraft, traveling through space toward a small blue planet. Elena sat up in bed, her heart racing. Cosmos was sitting beside her, his eyes glowing with that familiar golden light. He had shared a vision with her, but Elena wasn't sure if it was a memory from his past or a glimpse of the future. "Is someone coming?" she whispered. Cosmos touched his snout to her forehead, and suddenly Elena understood. The crash that had orphaned the three hatchlings hadn't been an accident. It had been an escape pod, launched from a larger ship when that ship came under attack from an unknown enemy. But the main ship had survived, and its crew had been searching for the missing pod and its precious cargo ever since. Elena felt a mixture of excitement and heartbreak. If Cosmos's vision was true, the hatchlings' own people were coming for them. They would be reunited with their species and taken to their true home. But that meant Elena would lose them forever. Over the next few days, Elena noticed changes in all three hatchlings. They were more alert, more restless. They spent hours on the roof of Elena's house at night, staring at the stars with an intensity that made Elena's chest tight with emotion. Aurora began generating electrical fields strong enough to interfere with local radio transmissions. Nova started creating complex mathematical equations that she drew in the sand of their basement habitat. Cosmos remained close to Elena, as if he could sense her growing sadness about their eventual separation. The signs that Elena had been dreading finally came on a cold December night. Elena woke to find all three hatchlings missing from the house. She ran outside and found them in the middle of her largest field, arranged in a triangle formation. Above them, lights were moving in the sky in patterns that were definitely not natural. Elena watched from her back porch as a ship larger than a football stadium slowly descended from the clouds. It was beautiful beyond description, made of a material that seemed to shift between metal and crystal. Gentle light poured from its surface, illuminating the entire area without causing any heat or discomfort. As the ship touched down in Elena's field, a section of its hull opened like a blooming flower. three figures emerged, and Elena's breath caught in her throat. They looked like Aurora, Nova, and Cosmos, but fully grown and magnificent. Their scales shimmered with colors Elena had never seen, and their wings were vast and powerful. When they moved, they seemed to flow rather than walk, and Elena could feel waves of intelligence and compassion radiating from them. The reunion between the adult aliens and the hatchlings was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Elena watched as the three babies she had raised rushed to their rescuers, making sounds of pure joy. The adults surrounded them with their wings, creating a protective circle that pulsed with soft light. Elena knew she should stay hidden, but Cosmos broke away from the group and flew toward her. He landed gently beside her and pressed his snout to her hand one last time. The wave of emotion that passed between them was overwhelming. Elena felt Cosmos's gratitude, his love, and his sadness at leaving her. But she also felt something else, a promise. One of the adult aliens approached Elena. Unlike the hatchlings, this being could speak, its voice resonating directly in Elena's mind with perfect clarity. "You cared for our young when they were lost and afraid," the voice said. "You gave them love when they needed it most. We are in your debt." Elena found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," the aliens said. "Most of your kind would have seen only subjects for study or weapons for war. You saw children who needed love. That is rare and precious." The alien gestured toward Aurora, Nova, and Cosmos, who were now surrounded by what Elena realized were their actual parents and siblings. "They will remember you always. And should you ever need us, we will come." Elena watched as the alien family prepared to board their ship. Aurora looked back at Elena and spread her wings in what Elena had learned was their gesture of respect and affection. Nova approached and gently placed a small crystalline device at Elena's feet. Cosmos remained beside Elena until the last moment, his golden eyes filled with love and gratitude. As the ship began to rise, Elena felt tears streaming down her face. She was happy for the three beings she had grown to love, but her heart was breaking at the same time. The ship paused in its ascent, hovering about 100 feet above the ground. Suddenly, Elena's mind was filled with images. Aurora, Nova, and Cosmos living happily among their own kind, learning from adult teachers, playing with other young of their species. But in every image, they carried something that reminded Elena of their time together. Aurora wore a small collar made of braided copper wire that Elena had made for her. Nova carried colored stones like the ones Elena had used to teach her mathematics. Cosmos had a small stuffed animal that Elena had given him when he was sick. The final image Elena received was of the three aliens, now fully grown, standing in a place of honor among their people. They were teachers and leaders sharing the lessons of compassion and love they had learned from a human who had treated them as family when they needed it most. As the ship disappeared into the stars, Elena noticed the crystalline device Nova had left behind was glowing softly. When she picked it up, it projected a holographic message in Nova's musical language, which somehow Elena could understand perfectly. "Thank you for being our mother when we had none. Thank you for teaching us that not all humans are to be feared. We will carry your love with us always. And someday, we will return to share our knowledge with your kind as you shared your kindness with us." Elena stood in her field long after the ship had vanished, holding the crystal and remembering every moment she had shared with the three alien babies who had changed her life forever. She never saw them again, but sometimes on clear nights, she would notice unusual star patterns in the sky that seemed to pulse with familiar rhythms. And whenever she felt sad or alone, a warm feeling would wash over her, as if three loving beings somewhere among the stars were sending her comfort across the vastness of space. Elena had lost her children, but gained something even more precious, the knowledge that love and compassion could bridge any gap, even the vast distance between worlds and species. Years later, when Elena was an old woman, she would tell her story to a few trusted friends. Most thought it was a beautiful fairy tale, but those who looked closely at her house would notice the reinforced basement with its unusual lighting system, the crystalline device that still glowed softly on her mantelpiece, and the way Elena always smiled when she looked up at the night sky. And sometimes, just sometimes, those who were with her on quiet evenings would hear her humming a strange, beautiful melody that sounded like nothing of this world, a lullaby that 3 alien dragon hatchlings had once sung to comfort their human mother in the darkness of night.